Have you ever felt like you're doing everything right, but you're still not getting the job offers you deserve? Or maybe you're wondering, what am I missing in this job search? Well, today we're going to dive into some of those insights and help you land your next opportunity and, yes, build your career confidence. I'm Kelly Mooney, founder and CEO of Equipped Women. Welcome to my Get Equipped interview series. I'm here today with Dilara Casey, friend, former colleague, current collaborator, and the guru behind Equip Women's resume revamp service. She's revamped and rewritten hundreds of resumes. Hi, Dilara, how are you?
I'm wonderful. I'm so excited for our conversation today. It feels like this is kind of on the top of a lot of people's minds, so I'm excited to get into it.
It totally is. And I love that by day you're a marketing professional, but also helping job seekers land their next job and earn more. You and I have that in common for sure. You've got a wealth of experience with job seekers and recruitment strategies. And I know that you're here just to help make a difference. So I'm happy that you're here and I
Yay.
want to just get into it. Is that all right with you?
Let's do it. Let's do
All
it. Yeah,
right.
let's do it.
So let's start with resumes. We know they're key in a job search, but so many women I've coached wonder if or how they arrive on an interviewing shortlist. Like, how do they arrive on the hiring manager's desk? Can you
Yeah.
shed some light on that?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think one thing that I hear from a lot of people is, well, someone told me this advice. And I say, when did they tell you that advice? And it's 15 years ago, 20 years ago. So today in 2025, this is the advice that I give. And, with the caveat that it can change over time. So, the number one thing that you have to do to ensure that you're going to get an interview is to actually apply for the job. I've had so many people not apply for the job through the proper channels that the company wants. So, if the
Hmm.
company has a job posting on their website, apply on the website. Don't just pass your resume along to a friend and hope it gets considered. A
Hmm.
lot of companies have compliance and regulations that they have to follow. So, it's really important that you apply for the job, number one, the way that the company wants you to apply for it. Now, as a job seeker, I think there are some really key factors to help make sure that you get to the top of that stack. In today's market, it's really competitive. A lot of companies aren't hiring super aspirational candidates. They want someone who can hit the ground running. So they're looking for about an 80% plus match on the job description.
Hmm.
So if you think you could do it, but you don't have proof that you can, that's going to be a challenge for you to get your resume seen and
Hmm.
to score that interview. The other thing too is to be an early applicant. Right now, there are just the applicant pool is so high and so competitive. You think about that job posting, the recruiter only needs one person. So if
Yep.
they get 1,000 applicants, they're going to do what you or I would do. They would look through like the first 100, right? And
Exactly.
and pick a couple. So there is a lot of like proactive job seeking that you have to do. You kind of have to get into a rhythm of checking daily, checking even as much as twice a day for any jobs that are posted that are fresh so that you can be an early applicant. So, the two biggest things I think are just to make sure that you are an early applicant and that you match at least 80% of the criteria. Now, there's some bonus things too. If you do know
Hmm.
someone who works there, it's great to have an internal referral or advocate to help make sure your resume gets seen. I wouldn't use that as my only avenue though.
Yeah. So if you have an internal advocate, would you also send your resume to them, hoping they'll pass it along and go through the formal channel? Do you recommend that?
Yeah, and I think I do recommend that, but I would also, if you, you've got to be quick, but you want to do it right. So
Yeah.
some organizations require require the employee to populate an internal referral code for you or an internal referral link for you. And
Yeah.
if you apply for the job before that, you can't use that link.
Oh, good tip.
So there's a little bit of a nuance there. So what I would
Yeah.
typically do if I see a job, hurry up and like message the person and say, "Can you let me know? I know this is a kind of a rush, but I'd like to know by the end of the day if you could just like peek and let me know if this is an opportunity you could help me with." If you don't hear back from them, then I would go ahead and apply. So that way you're at
Okay,
least an
that's
early
that's
applicant.
great advice.
Mhm.
Last week I talked to somebody who said, "Hey, can you look at this job on LinkedIn?" And it had 89 applications, and I said, "Oh, wow, this is you should move fast." In my brain, I didn't know, but I thought, "Oh, I wonder if they'll just turn it off after 100," and they did, and
Yeah,
so it
they
was too
do.
late.
Yeah,
Yeah.
early bird definitely gets the worm, but there are other layers to that too. And then, Another way to make sure that you get visibility from the organization, like follow them on LinkedIn, engage on their posts, connect with other people at the organization so that if your name does come up on the short list of potential interviewees, they have some recognition there and they recognize your
Yeah.
name.
Yeah, that's smart. So what do you think are some of the mistakes you see on people's resumes that could be holding them from, maybe standing out or landing a higher paying role? What do you think are some of the
Yeah.
maybe common mistakes?
The most consistent oversight, I think, is people write their resumes for the jobs they have and not the jobs they want.
Mm,
So often it's just a regurgitation of this is what I'm doing. And people are failing to see how they can transfer those skills
mm,
up a level,
mm,
how that project, a lot of folks downplay what they do. I think this is another big thing. And I do see it predominantly in women, but I just
mm,
met with a gentleman last night and I said, your resume says helped, assisted, coordinated. You led, you managed, you spearheaded, you supervised, you
hmm.
orchestrated. So just to take a little bit more credit for the work that you did.
Yeah.
I think there's a humbleness you've got to overcome on your resume to make sure that you stand out and that you take credit for the work you've done. But just definitely positioning that resume for what's next. I think it's
Hmm.
very easy just to kind of sit in the today and not think about the tomorrow. So those are some common things I think really tactically when you're writing your resume, people get a little bit overly absorbed in writing what they want to talk about and not necessarily what they think the reader
Mm,
needs to see.
mm.
Um, your recruiter or hiring manager is going to look at your resume for about 5 to 10 seconds before they decide they want to read more. So you've really got to be impactful in the first third of your resume. A quick summary statement, 1 to 2 sentences. Who are you? What do you do? And I mean, like, if it, like, in old school Twitter days, 140 characters or less, like, you want it to be really
Hmm.
succinct. You want to have your key skills right at the top of the page, and then get right into your work history.
Gotcha. Gotcha. So a summary statement, not necessarily an objective. So something that's more of a current summary, not a future focused statement. Is
Yeah,
that
I mean,
accurate?
yes. And a lot of recruiters joke. They say, we know your objective is to get a job. So
Hmm.
they want to know a little bit more about you. So,
Hmm.
who are you? Like I said, who are you? What do you do? And how do you do it? And the other thing too is to include a link, especially if you have a common name, include a link to your LinkedIn profile because the next place they're going to go if they're interested in you is your LinkedIn profile. And if you're Joe Smith, Susie Smith, it's going to be hard for them to know who's who. So it's really important to try to give them all of the tools and information they need to assess if you're the right person or not, just right off the bat.
That's great advice. Okay, so what about cover letters? I know they're so divisive. Some people say they're outdated, others people say they're
Yeah.
essential, but what's your take?
If they ask for one, provide one. If they don't, you don't have to, is my broad rule of thumb, but I have seen some patterns out there right now. So larger organizations where they're seeing super high volumes of applicants and they're using a really stringent applicant tracking system, they just don't require them. And that's
Mm,
totally fine.
yeah.
I have seen with some smaller companies, some local organizations where there's maybe a smaller team, they really want to get to know the person and they do require a cover letter. So I always think it's good to have just an outline of a cover letter that you have on the ready that you can, craft to fit whatever role you're applying for. But if they say you need one, use it. If not, then don't attach it.
Gotcha. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that's good advice. Well, let's talk a little bit about how all this matters on LinkedIn. So, we know it's a tool for networking and job searching and all the things, but a lot of people feel maybe insecure about their LinkedIn page
Mm-hmm.
or that it's good enough. And so, what are some of the common, mistakes that people make with their profiles that might limit the opportunities they have? And then maybe a few tips that will make their page better.
Yeah, that's a great question. I have a mantra I started speaking a couple months ago is like LinkedIn is not going to be where you will find your next job. It is where your next job will find you.
Mm,
Recruiters heavily use this tool to help seek applicants, to help parse and sort through, resumes that they've seen and match them up. So this is a really strong recruiter tool. So the having an optimized profile, having an updated profile is really important for people who are job seeking because you will be found. So, ways to make sure that it's optimized. Number one is at the very bottom of your LinkedIn, go update those skills. If you have Microsoft Word on there, you need to take a hard look at your skills and update them and make them a little bit stickier than what you may have had before. I was just working with an executive whose skills were like, I think there was a really basics like teamwork or something. And I'm like, you have a lot of opportunity to amplify what you've done since you last updated this. So
That's
those are
so
basic.
interesting. You're saying go to the bottom and focus on skills. I always think about that banner at the top and how powerful that is. Is that important to
Yes.
you as well? Okay.
Yeah, it absolutely is. I mean, I 100% agree that that's important, but I think people just only focus on that and they don't go to the bottom. Your
And
skills
yeah.
are basically the SEO on your page, right?
Hmm.
So get that in order and update that. People neglect that the most. I think most people are pretty good about updating their header and their job titles. So you absolutely do want to do that, Kelly. You're 100% right. But I think people kind of neglect everything below that. So make sure
Hmm.
that you have your titles reflective of the job that you either aspire to or have, or reflects some specific skills or area of focus that you have. Make sure that your summary is succinct, but also reflective. Again, like leaning into what you want to do next. And then that your job, this is a really important piece. I hear a lot of this from recruiters, that your job history matches your resume.
Oh, interesting.
If the dates look off or weird, if there's something missing or wrong or whatever, recruiters are going to notice that and be curious as to why. So make sure that those match up. But like I said, very important thing that I think people tend to overlook the most are the skills at the bottom of their
Hmm.
LinkedIn profile. And also have a real photo. Have if you can't get a professional photo, have a really nice one at least that you took on your phone, and make sure that you access the banner in the back. You can build a really nice banner on Canva for free, or you can use another tool to do it. But there are just basic LinkedIn template banners you can use. But I like one that also reflects the role that you have or shows a little bit more personality.
Yeah. Well, let's talk just a little bit more about that banner because sometimes I see people just repeating their job title, their current job title in that space instead of using that to be more harder working in terms of industry and function and maybe unique expertise or advanced education or something that sort of is maybe broader. What's your take
Right.
on that space specifically?
Yeah, I think it should complement those, but not necessarily be repetitive.
Hmm.
So, for me, I think I have like marketer, leader, visionary right now on mine. And then I might switch up my banner to say, marketing expert, career coach, resume writer, add a little more texture to it. So yeah, it should complement. They're siblings, but they shouldn't be twins.
Yeah, makes sense. Well, what about AI? Like how do we think about AI in terms of playing a role, knowing that there's tools that are scraping and looking for certain things? Like how can somebody craft their LinkedIn page to be savvy to that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, number one, I believe if you have, I have a LinkedIn premium account. So I'm speaking from that perspective. If you have a LinkedIn premium account, there actually is AI embedded in the back end of your profile. So you can
Mm.
just click the little sparkle icon and it will help you enhance your profile with AI, which I think is good. But also, you just want to make sure that it's enhancing it for the right role that you want. So what I like to do is go over to ChatGPT and ask it to help me write a profile and which
Mm.
keywords should I pay attention to including in that profile. And you'll get a good start there. I do recommend personalizing a little bit. You don't want to do a direct copy and paste. You want to have a little bit of your voice reflected in there. And then also, as you're optimizing your profile, I want to be a vice president of finance. What are the top 10 skills I should have on my LinkedIn profile?
Mm.
Ask ChatGPT that. It'll tell you if you have those skills. Make sure you go down to the bottom of your profile and add them, and get them endorsed. So, those are some important ways
That's
you can
really
use AI.
smart. And I think maybe even though somebody who's job searching might not feel like they want to spend the extra money to upgrade to premium, it might be worth it during the job search phase. So you have more of the bells and whistles of the actual platform.
Yeah. Now, I want to piggyback on that too with the investment of it. Number one, if you have an education stipend and you're currently employed, see if your employer will pay for a LinkedIn premium account because then you access LinkedIn Learning. So that can count as part of your education stipend.
Smart.
Number two, if you are in the middle of negotiating a severance, ask for them to pay for a LinkedIn premium account. You can see if they do that too. And then also, you can just do a quick search on LinkedIn, just do like free LinkedIn premium code. People get free codes with their
Hmm.
accounts every year that they can give a 30-day trial. So there are ways that you can access it if you don't have the funds. There's always workarounds for that. So I recommend just, seeing what's out there and, try to negotiate it with your employer too.
That's really smart. I don't think most people think about that, so that's a great tip.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's move on to job search strategies. So, related to some of the things we were just talking about with LinkedIn in general, sending out applications feels like a black hole. If somebody
Yes.
isn't getting responses, it's easy to feel discouraged. What adjustments should they consider to get better results?
Yeah. Great question. There's also a couple like clarifying questions I would ask. It kind of varies from person to person and from industry to industry and job family to job family, but I will give a pretty broad rule of thumb. If you
Okay.
feel like you're sending out a million applicants and your applications are not getting it, there's definitely some resume tweaking that needs to happen. But what I'm seeing with a lot of the people that I work with, it's about 1 in 50 applicants net an interview on
Mm,
average.
mm,
I've seen it be as tight as like 1 in 25 to 30 ish,
mm.
in some more high demand areas. So even in some of the most higher demand roles, we're seeing like about 25 resumes before they get a call. So number one, take a step back and look at your application volume. If you sent out 14 resumes and you haven't heard back, the numbers aren't there yet, right?
Mm.
So number one, I would just expect to have a high volume of applicants. That's the numbers game we're looking at right now. But if you exceed that amount and you're not hearing back, that's telling me that one of two things. One, your resume needs some work. You're not clearly articulating who you are, what you do best, and how. Or
Yeah.
number two, you're applying for jobs that you're not an 80% or more match for.
Mm.
So it could be one of those two things. So I would just take a step back and honestly get a second set of eyes on it. You could ask a former colleague, you could ask a friend. If you have a recruiter that you know or hiring manager that you know, I would just ask them to take a look at it and get some honest feedback. Because I think sometimes when you're in the weeds of applying for a job, your resume just you're sick of looking at your resume and it's hard to be objective about it. So it's always good to get another set of eyes on it.
Yeah. So you've mentioned this 80% number a couple of times in terms of matching the job spec if you apply for it.
Yep.
And you're probably familiar with the infamous Harvard Business Review research that found out, when men meet 60% of the qualifications, they apply for a job, but women often wait until they meet 100% of
Yeah.
the qualifications. And you're suggesting 80. But can you elaborate on the 80 a little bit more? Like, would the flex be in years of experience? Would it might be level? Would it be certain skills? Or quite honestly, is it any combination of those things?
That is a great question. It is to some extent a combination of those things. So the first thing is skills. They want to make sure you have those skills. That's probably the most imperative thing. And I'm talking like if you're 5+ years out in your career, like if
Yeah.
you're entry level college recent graduate, that's a different story. But if you've had some years of professional experience under your belt, they're looking for skills because they
Hmm.
don't want to have to train you and invest money in training you. Now, another big thing is industry experience. A lot of companies are hesitant to hire someone that hasn't had industry experience or adjacent industry experience because there is just a sharper learning curve on that. Not to say that they won't do it, but there is a sharper learning curve. So if you work at a vet hospital and you want to end up working in quick service restaurant industry, that's a really big shift.
Hmm.
So you want to make sure that you have some industry experience somehow, some tangible industry experience. So those are the two things I think that I would focus on the most of that, like
Hmm.
80%. Years of
Yeah.
experience, there's always going to be a little bit of flex on that because if you've worked at a startup for 2 years, that's like working in a corporation for 20. So I think that there are some other things outside of that 80% that could make you a higher match without you realizing it. It could be life experiences. It could be, we talked about, I think one time on a LinkedIn post about hobbies and extracurriculars. It could be something like that that you bring to the table, some outside experience that you have that enhances your profile as a candidate.
Mm.
So there are ways you can get to that 80%, and it doesn't have to be a hard straight line of, I've worked in this industry at this company and for this many years. It's a little
Yeah.
bit more of a mosaic.
So for the women that fall into the category that maybe aren't yet at 80% and they are, can do most of the job, but they're hesitating. Maybe they feel like they can only do 60% of it, basically struggling with confidence and quieting
Yeah.
their inner critic. What's your advice for that? Because I think women in general downplay their experience
Yes.
and their expertise. So what would be your guidance?
Number one, like honestly, go right back to the drawing board and rewrite your resume. I think,
Hmm.
you write it when you graduate college and you just keep Frankenstein adding to it over and over. You just like Mad Libs, you add to it, and you're not taking a full step back and looking at the big picture of your
Yeah.
career and who you are and what you do and what you do best. And when, I can tell you when I work with women, I'm working with one right now, and we were just having a quick touch base. And I said, any awards or recognition you want to add? And she told me these 2 awards that she won. And I was like, you're more than qualified for this job. Like you're the person that's going to interview you probably doesn't even qualify for this award. So I think, sometimes you again need that like extra voice of reason, but also just to take that really big step back and take a look at your career from the big picture, and then, add in the name of the company you worked at and the title you have. I think sometimes we get a little
Yeah.
too tied to our tenure in a role versus the skills and experience that we gained in that role.
Yeah. I love that advice because I do think so many people just very quickly add on to their current resume and don't really look at it holistically. Like I've looked at a couple of resumes with people you and I have worked with in the past
Yeah.
and said, "Hey Kelly, what do you think? I'm putting myself out there." And I look at it and I'm like, "You are so much bigger and better than this piece of paper." But they couldn't see it because they were doing what you said. They were just adding on their next job and not really
Yeah.
saying, wow, wait, I have a lot of professional experience. I need to retell the story of who I am and the value I can bring to the table. So I love
Yeah.
that advice you're bringing to
Yeah.
this conversation.
Well, and you did the same thing. You looked at my resume and you're like, Dilara, like, are you really? And I mean, yeah, I'm guilty of it myself, right? I'm looking at my own resume. And one other quick tool I will say, go to ChatGPT, ask ChatGPT, write a professional overview for me. And I will tell you, it's pretty accurate. It's pretty
Mm.
accurate. It's pretty inspiring. It's pretty confidence boosting, and it will give you a perspective that's valuable.
Yeah, I love that. So that's a great tip and resource. And so beyond that in LinkedIn, what other resources, if any, would you recommend to people who are trying to get their head in the game and be a confident job seeker?
Yeah, I think networking, I think really helps. And so there's two reasons, one of two reasons you're looking for a job. One, maybe you just got laid off, or two, you're in a situation you want to explore new opportunities. If you were part of a mass layoff, I've seen this happen multiple times. I've seen the group of people get together, create a Slack channel, and support one another through their journey.
Hmm.
And I've talked to a couple job seekers that were like, this was my salvation. Sometimes these are people that just get it. You know, getting laid off and losing your job is a traumatic experience within itself. So it didn't just double as a networking opportunity. It was a little bit of a support group, and they were celebrating wins together and amplifying each other's voices and really, really creating a really rich network that I think is going to carry on through the experience that they had. So that's one thing. If you're actively looking for a job but you're employed, you're going to be kind of quiet about it. So I think being really strategic and networking is important. There are a bunch of different organizations you can join. Some of them are virtual, some of them you can go to do face-to-face things. I'm based here in Columbus, Ohio. I joined Together Digital. They have national chapters
Hmm.
across the country. That is a really great female focused organization. great Slack channel. Everyone's really supportive when we need it. If you're a young professional, obviously Equipped Women can set you up if you're in a cohort or something like that to meet some new people. But there are also going to be like young professional organizations in your area, and I suggest getting involved in those. And it could be just as simple as reaching out to someone on LinkedIn that has a role that you aspire to have and say, hey, I just found your profile on LinkedIn. Would you be open to a 15-minute Zoom call so I could learn more about how you got to where you are?
Hmm.
I advise this to people all the time, and very rarely has anyone reported back to me that they've gotten a no. Most people say yes.
Yeah, I
So
found the
yeah,
same thing. The number of people that I suggest, like, just reach out to people you don't know, and they're like, really? I can really like, and I'm like, well, some people might not see it or don't check LinkedIn, or you might not hear from them, but most people aren't going to say no. They might not get the message, but a lot of people who do get the message are going to say yes. And so
yeah,
I love that tip.
yeah.
Um, One of the tips I really like is making people aware of a book that was written by Phil Terry, and it's called Never Search Alone.
Hmm.
And he started a nonprofit volunteer organization that goes with the book, and it's all free. And they match job seekers into groups of 4 or 6 people, and they provide training and support. I don't know if you ever got yourself
No, that's
into
cool.
that network, but the people I hear who participated in it say it's game changing. So that's another move I suggest for
Yeah.
people who feel alone, and this helps them overcome that.
Yeah, I love that. And again, if you're introverted and just kind of want to do it, you can find Reddit threads to join too. You just got to kind of kick over some new stones. That's what I tell people. Like if you're, you know, just kick over a couple new stones. If you feel weird about like putting yourself out there, just do something a little different. Go to a different coffee shop one day. Strike up a conversation with a stranger. You never know where it'll go.
Yeah, I
So,
think sometimes when we talk about networking in our programs, our in our community groups, a lot of women say, "Oh, I don't really know. Like, what do I say?" Like
mhm.
when they're looking for an opportunity, they don't want to be like, "Hire me." And so, do you have words that help somebody transition into that, especially if it's somebody they don't know very well, in terms of asking for help but not asking for a job specifically?
Yeah, I mean, number one, if you're reaching out to a stranger on LinkedIn asking to connect, there's usually a reason why, and everyone's pretty accepting about that, right? But I would just say, I'd love to connect with you and learn some more. I'm interested in roles at your company. Would love to know if you had any insight. And usually the help comes organically out of that. I think just
Mm-hmm.
making that first ask to connect is really valuable.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I do want to give a little bit of a like don't do this piece of advice. I've been hearing this a lot from my recruiter friends. If there's a job posted, don't go on LinkedIn and reach out to the recruiter and ask them for a cup of coffee
Mm.
because they've got about 1,000 other people that just did the same thing.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, with LinkedIn, I think that that's a really powerful tool. Another thing too is tap into your network, like create a chain
Hmm.
effect, create a chain reaction of networking. So I tell people this all the time. I'm going to introduce you to one person. After you guys are going to hit it off, however you meet, and when you're done, ask them if there's anything you can do for them, and then ask them if they can introduce you to somebody else. And you will never have to go networking cold turkey ever again. And
Yeah.
as your network grows, you can make recommendations and connections, and you can go down this journey. And I actually did this one year. It was about 5 years ago. I did this, and I got 63 networking connections in a row before finally someone's like, I don't know who we should meet. But it was 63 cups of coffee.
I love
So
that.
yeah, so it's possible. It just starts with that first ask.
Well, I think also one of the things I've discovered is that you have to know what it is you want help with. So if it's just open-ended, like, can you help me? And I'm just speaking for myself because I talk to so many people in a given day or week. It's like, well, what does help look like? Does help look
Yeah.
like learning more about my journey? Does help look like meeting somebody that I might know? Does help look like reviewing your resume? Does it help look like expanding the possibilities that you might be considering? So that would be some advice I would give, which is like define what help looks like, and it might be different with the different people that you're talking to.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. And, it is important that if you're going to put yourself out there and make that request, that it's got some texture to it. Because again, it's like if you, scream, help me, no one's not going to know what to do.
Yeah,
So it might even be, a good idea as you're figuring out your job search strategy and what your journey looks like. You might realize, I could use a LinkedIn recommendation here. I could use this, someone to look at my resume, just to make a list so that
yeah,
when you do ask for help, you have one or two things they could choose from. If you give them a choice, they pick one or the other. If you just ask them one thing, they're going to say yes or no. So that way you're
yeah.
opening yourself up to get a positive result out of that too.
And I love that I saw on your LinkedIn that you're proactively making a recommendation
Yes.
for somebody every day. I think is that what you said?
Every week, every
Every
week.
week, every week,
Yeah.
which is awesome because that's really how recommendation should happen. It's awkward when you say, "Hey, can you recommend me?" But when you proactively recommend somebody, they're inclined to want to recommend you in return. So I think
Right.
it's not only smart but it's not only generous, but it's
Yeah.
smart is probably the way I
Yeah.
would sum that up.
And it's
Oh,
karma too. It's karma, I think.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Well, so let's talk a little bit about trends in hiring. There's a big pushback going on.
Yeah.
It makes me sick to my stomach in terms of what's happening with major companies canceling their policies that help people who have been historically disadvantaged in all the ways. So, what are you seeing now? How do you think that this pullback from DEI is impacting hiring? And are there any other trends happening that you think job seekers should be aware of now?
Yeah. Oh, those are great questions. Well, the DEI stuff is pretty fresh still. So, and also we know who all those companies are. It's all over the news.
Yeah.
So when people ask me for advice, I say then don't apply to those companies. Like just don't, you know, go where you are celebrated and not tolerated is what I like to say. So, number one, I think just being really aware of what your morals and values are and finding companies that align with that. And the good thing
Hmm.
about the internet nowadays is that you can figure that out pretty quickly with a couple searches, and just do a little bit of digging before you start to apply for jobs. So, number one, because I did have someone tell me, they're from the LGBTQ community, and he asked, should I remove this, thing off of my resume? I had a DEI
Mm.
award. And I said, no. I mean, unless you want to work for a company that doesn't want you to be proud of that, you know? So,
Hmm.
so there's a morals alignment there. But so I am seeing as a result of some of these large companies, number one, cutting those programs, but also it means they're cutting jobs. So
Yeah.
trends that I'm seeing are people are realizing that there are a lot of opportunities in their own backyard. There's a lot of locally owned mom and pop companies that still need a lot of those roles filled. They might not have the same, corporate swagger that some of those big companies have. It might feel like a step back in your career to go work at an organization that's, not a FANG or a MANG company. But I am seeing a lot of people going back to those like
Mm.
local companies, and a lot of people are now compromising on remote work. The last couple of years, everyone's wanted remote work. We know that that's been going away pretty much for the last 18 months or so. And there are some large companies that are leading the charge on that, and other organizations are following suit. So, big trends I see are number one, return to work, hybrid or in office. You got to be okay with it. I mean, the other big trend I see is a little bit more of a return to like local roots, like hyper local
Mm.
work. And I think those are two big things. With the DEI, it's still too early to tell exactly, but I
Hmm.
do see a lot of people um, just not applying at those companies. And so
Mm.
I'm curious how that's going to impact their workforce,
Yeah.
and the quality of the outputs of that company.
Yeah.
That's yet to be seen, but I see a lot of people recreating new paths for themselves.
Yeah, and some of those big companies are reacting to activists that are putting pressure on them, while others are saying, hey, this is what makes our workforce great, and our workforce reflects our customer base, and this is
Right.
delivers business value, bottom line results, innovation, all these other things. So it might be interesting to see in a few years if it becomes an advantage in some way by staying the course, and staying true to the programs that have been in place. I think some companies are dropping certain vocabulary, but staying true to the programs and the strategies. So time will tell on that front. I think you're right. It's a little
Yeah.
early.
Yeah.
Um, well, let me ask you about all the people that you've coached who have been the most successful in getting a job.
Yeah.
What did they do differently than those who took much longer to get offers?
Mm.
What were their their tricks or tips that you offered to
Yeah.
them?
So, the extra mile is seldom crowded. So, if you are fortunate enough to go online and apply for the job and score the interview without having to do anything extra like being an early applicant, having an internal referral, or any of that other stuff, then you're a pretty strong candidate. So the next thing I'd make sure is that you practice interviewing. I think the
Mm,
interview is where a lot of things can fall apart. The interview is either going to make it or break it for you. And so, I tell people you should put like just as much energy into your interview practice as you did into applying for that job. If it took you an hour and a half to get your resume together and apply for that job online, then you should put 3 hours of interview practice in,
mm,
because this is your first impression and you need to make sure that you're prepared. So I think a lot of people feel like once they get the interview, they're home free. So the people that have been really successful that have had like multiple offers are the ones that really hone in on their interview. They research the company, they come with good questions, they have follow-ups. So another thing I'm seeing too that some folks do that I recommend, and I've started doing it, is you create a leave behind after your first interview.
mm.
So it's got a professional bio and a couple quick hits that maybe you discussed during that conversation, or maybe you didn't have a chance to. So it's like a nice follow-up piece
Mm.
that you can send as along with your thank you for your interview. But and I also see the people that are the most successful are just optimistic and positive during the whole entire process, which I know is very difficult to do. But I really think that, energy and attitude can help you get through this tough time. And
Yep.
it does come across, when you're meeting people, it does, your energy introduces you before you enter the room. So make sure that you come with your head on straight in that interview. So those are a couple of things. No real big top secret tricks.
Well, those are all
But
really good. And I'm going to plug your TikTok because I know you
thanks.
found the top 50 questions that get asked in interviews. And then you did a video for each of those, which
Yes.
is awesome. So people should find you, and we can put those in comments or show notes,
Yeah.
on TikTok because you tackle the tough questions and the answers are great. So thank you for
Thanks.
that.
Thank you. Yeah.
Uh, and last, for your general advice, just to anybody to say, like, what's one piece of career advice? I know you just talked about it, be positive, bring energy, have a
Hmm.
follow up. Is there any one big piece of career advice you want to give, to anybody out there who's beginning their search?
Oh gosh. I think embrace embrace the journey.
Mm,
You're going to learn things about yourself along the way, and just be aware of those cues and don't ignore them, embrace them. You'll learn a lot about yourself. If it's a long journey, you'll learn how resilient you are. So I always just tell people it's you're going to get a job at the end of this. Like that's the goal. It's going to happen. The path that leads you there is not going to maybe be the one that you envision. So the less resistant you are to any twists and turns along the way, the more you'll learn about yourself and the happier you'll be when you do land that job and, get that role that you were looking for.
I love that. Well, we'll leave it there. Thank you, Dilara, for
Yes.
sharing your
Yeah,
expertise
of
today. I love it so
course.
much. To all of
Yeah.
you tuning in, take a moment to reflect on how you're approaching this. There's been great advice that you can incorporate into your search. You can also have Dilara have a look at your resume, go onto our website. You can book a resume revamp. You can follow us on LinkedIn. You can follow Dilara on LinkedIn. And certainly sign up for my email newsletter at equippedwomen.com to get the ongoing support you need to advance your career, get the job you love, and make more money. All right,
Yes.
everybody. Thanks so much. And until next time.